Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fran and Friends podcast. Today's podcast is being pre recorded, so some things will be edited if we don't want it in there. I have a wonderful guest with me today who shares spaces with me in more than just Zoom, but you don't need to know that. So today, Brad Shore, he's a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's been doing this since 1997. And Brad talks quite a bit about childhood trauma, how emotionally it affects us as adults. And I would love for him to share how his journey began. Brad, welcome to the Fran and Friends podcast.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a joy to be here, and I know you and I have talked for a little while about arranging this, so I'm so glad it's working out today. And yeah, so my journey here, wow. So um, basically, I became a therapist primarily due to my own childhood trauma and being raised in a very dysfunctional home. Um, I was one of three kids, lots of tension between my parents, which then caused my mother in particular to seek out a companion, now an emotional companion. This has nothing to do with any kind of physical touching or anything sexual, but it's called emotional incest, basically, is what unfolded. That's when a parent takes over a child for their own emotional needs because they're in a bad marriage or they're somehow unhappy in their life. Or it could be a single mother or single father that doesn't have a mate there. So they begin to rely on a child as sort of like their companion in terms of doing things with them, telling them all their adult problems. And then in telling them their problems, then the focus goes on to the parent, and the child doesn't then have much of a voice and even grows up thinking that they shouldn't say too much because after all, my mommy or my daddy seems to really need me to listen to them.
Mm.
So it sets into motion these very complicated sort of traumatic reactions in the child. So with that said, that was sort of my beginning, being the youngest of three, again, parents in a bad marriage. My mom just sort of doted on me to the point of where I was basically emotionally smothered, emotionally taken over.
Mm.
So that has this term, as I mentioned, it's called emotional incest. People get a bit confused by the term in terms of thinking incest, ooh, yuck, it's physical. No, there is physical incest. That's a whole nother diagnosis, and that's very sad. That's sexual abuse, of course. But I'm not talking about that here at all. This is just purely when a parent uses a child emotionally.
Is it almost like the parent is now using the child as a counselor, a therapist,
Yeah.
and the kid has no choice but to
Yeah,
operate as
absolutely. You're robbed of what your identity is all about, and then the focus gets turned on the parent. It's more common from mothers to sons, is probably the most common, but it definitely can happen like from fathers to daughters or vice versa, either way. But the most common is mothers to son. It goes deep in terms of identity. Sometimes it can impact sexual orientation, because what can happen with that, if a son is very much taken over, then they grow up, they're starting to date, let's say, and then now they associate dating a woman. Oh, a lot of this is unconscious, by the way. That woman is now going to probably take me over the way my mother did. A woman represents somebody who's going to smother me, and I'm going to have to sort of turn myself inside out for them. So no wonder a lot of men who start to date, if they're raised by narcissistic mothers like this. By the way, most mothers who do this are narcissists, as well as the fathers. That's a very common dynamic, is the narcissism. And so then hence you have sons now, let's say at this point, wanting to date, and they quite often run away from that. They're going to have intimacy issues. They likely are not going to want to really settle down with a woman because that's a little too scary. So, or they could just become asexual, avoid the whole thing. So it's kind of a big deal. It gets
wow.
ignored in psychology a lot. And so, in answer to your original question, I found there's this huge need to work with this population group. And so, hence, my practice is pretty much geared towards that. I'd say 90% of my practice are people coming in for this type of emotional abuse. And this is indeed abuse. Sometimes people get confused by that because on the outside, it looks like, oh, what a great relationship they have. Oh my gosh, look at this very doting mother who's really just interested in this case, her son, or a father and his daughter. And so then you're not believed when you get older, when you communicate that it's caused you problems in your life. People don't see it. Oh, I don't believe that. That's nonsense. You had the best mother in the world, or to a daughter, you had the best father, not realizing these dynamics have sort of thwarted the identity development of that child. They now are stymied, arrested development, if you will. So anyway, that's what I pretty much focus on.
So, what does that look like for people that aren't aware of the behaviorisms of being emotionally incest? Like, I heard what you said earlier about your experience. So, if they're currently in that situation, they don't really know that they're being overtaken in this way. What would be some of the key things to look out for?
Yeah, so usually what you see in kids growing up like this, which begins to cause the problems that they have later in life, is because they're robbed of their voice, so to speak. Some of the common signs are extreme people pleasers.
Mm,
They always appear like everything's okay when in fact the opposite is going on. They're
mm,
not going to have much of an opinion. They rarely are going to want to show anger anywhere because they weren't allowed to display true, authentic feelings at home, especially anger to the offending parent. So you're going to see a kid who kind of acts like a chameleon. They can be nice. They like most people are like, oh, it's the nicest kid, right? Oh, they're so sweet. But they're on the quiet side somewhat and all that. But the sweetness is really just a symptom. It's just a way to deal with how they've been emotionally smothered. You have to usually have a therapist trained to some degree to see past the facade that everything's okay and they can appear very laid back. And you have to be able to help them understand that part of them that they had to hide from their parents. And that's what's so sad. No fault of the kids at all. They just grow up thinking they have to hide who they really are, of course, to their parents. And so then they think they have to bring the hiding into their adult life. So it's complicated because you're trying to help them understand, no, the parts of you that are most valuable, number one, is all of you, including parts that are maybe depressed or sad or angry. But yeah, so how it shows is definitely people pleasing, I think, would be the top sign. And sometimes it can then cross over as they get older into like eating disorders is very
mm.
common. Addiction issues, alcoholism, relationship problems for sure, because based on how they were raised, they don't feel safe being intimate with another person,
Mm.
which means opening up and being vulnerable, of course. They can fall in love, sure, but are they going to be able to have the communication skills necessary to build a life with somebody and work through conflict and show their angry side and also take in the angry side of a spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend? Anger is just a normal human emotion, right? It's completely fine, but they were raised with these ideas that I don't like it, I don't know what to do. And so first sign of conflict in a relationship, sometimes they'll bolt because they don't know how to handle
I totally see myself in all of those
it.
things. All, totally, because I was thinking about a time when I was in a relationship with this one person, and I realized that, oh, dang, I don't have the communication skills. So I had the vulnerability enough to say, oh, could you help teach, me and my kids how to have conversation? And he did. Um, Also, too, I didn't realize that I didn't know how to be vulnerable until he asked me a question, and I forgot what the question was, but it made me feel so uncomfortable that I froze and I wasn't able to speak for at least maybe 30 to 40 minutes. And so all he did was hold me in that space. He just held me,
Wow.
didn't say anything. And then at the end of it, he was like, "You're safe." And those words to me really let my guard down because, like you said, I didn't hear this from a male perspective. So
Mm,
hearing it from somebody we're in an intimate setting, like that really broke the walls down. And I'm
mm.
really grateful that I had that experience because now I can be able to do that for others. So, that was amazing.
That's an incredible story, and that's exactly what you needed. I mean, it's so interesting how he knew to do that. It's wonderful. He just basically held the space, which is going to be an important first step for sure. That's
Yeah. And when you were talking about people pleasing, even now, I'm still working through some of that stuff. It's the Fran and Friend podcast. So, I like to use myself as an example, everybody. So, hey, have fun with it. If you see yourself in there, hey, it might be triggering for you to take a look at that area of your own life. So, with people pleasing, because I believe this happened to me even with my mother, that same thing, but I didn't know that was the psychological term used for it.
Mhm.
But like I see myself in ways as I'm growing to know who myself is. I didn't really have that time to develop these different skills to help me acclimate in the different levels emotionally growing up. And so now I'm seeing like, oh, that behavior, Fran, that looks like you're trying to find a friend or please them. Why?
Mm,
And so now that I have the capacity to take a break and ask myself why, I'm grateful because, oh, now I can use these tools that I've learned either through reading or conversations like this
mm,
to really help myself rebalance why I'm having this conversation with this person or why I'm having this emotional trigger.
mhm. That's wonderful to hear that. And it's interesting how it connects to your life as we're talking about it. And for people who are listening, Fran and I know each other a bit from another group we belong to, but not very well, not intimately. It's interesting that it is a bit of an issue for you in your history. So then, yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
have that in common. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with the relationships, like I said earlier, having to really commit to a relationship, I always lost myself
Oh, yes. Yes.
because I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And so I always identified this identity. Oh, I needed to please this person so that way they don't leave me. I
Uh,
needed to do the things they like to do because it'll keep them, not knowing that the person that I already is already attractive, is already worthy, is already uh, the person that this other person wants to share time and space with. And losing myself, that's where I didn't know that I didn't need to do any of that.
mhm. Well, what I find interesting is your insights are amazing. And so I'm curious, especially as a therapist for sure here. Did you garner these insights through therapy, or has this just sort of unfolded for you through your being open to looking at your life? Because you have some great insights with all of this.
Yeah, no, I did. I did 2 years of therapy,
Mm,
in which towards the end, I think of my first year, I was sitting down in my best friend's living room, and I said, "This shit is too hard. I don't want to do it." I said, "I've never really, after I had a breakup, I never really cried or processed the emotion. I jumped from a relationship to relationship to
oh,
relationship. And having to sit there to deal with the disappointment,
mhm,
to deal with the pain, to deal with the even the childhood trauma that was coming up because of what I hadn't dealt with. These were years of emotions flooding my being. And I'd said, I'm quitting and I'm telling I'm finna fucking quit. I just, I don't want to do this
Hmm.
shit anymore because it's too
Hmm.
hard. I didn't know how to facilitate my own emotions in that space. And then she said to me, okay, Fran, her name's Fran too, by the way. So you just want to repeat the cycle is what I'm hearing?
Mm.
And I just looked at her like, bitch, I hate you. So I picked the phone and I called the therapist and I was like, okay, I'll reschedule. So yeah, I had my best friend at the time and then the therapist, and then just really doing the work, Brad, you know?
Hmm.
She gave me some books, and I'm sure that these are books you know. He's the one that teaches how to have difficult conversations.
Well, I know, I don't know if you're speaking of John Bradshaw, but Bradshaw's a big one in terms of dealing with codependency and how we lose our voice.
Yeah, it was Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg.
Oh, I have not heard of that. Yeah.
Oh my God. The practice of putting these things into play, like, we can go see the therapist, right? But doing the work is the real
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really tolerating uncomfortable feelings because I found a really good therapist and did similar work to you for many, many years. But what I had to learn is what you're describing right there is we have to be able to work through and hold and let really uncomfortable feelings just be because we were trained at an early age to sort of push feelings away, dissociate a bit. So now we already have this dissociation going on in life in many ways because it crosses over into other aspects of our life. So then the bulk of the work then is just, if we put it in a real simplified form, is we want to get in touch with blocked feelings and work with them. When I start with clients who are working on this issue, sometimes they're looking for, and it's understandable, like, well, how do I get through this? How much time will this take? Can you give me like a bullet list of what I need to do? But I try to explain as best I can, it's actually kind of the opposite. When we're talking about getting in touch with repressed feelings, it's sort of, we're just going to allow, it's going to be more of an allowing and tolerating the strong discomfort. Could even be rage towards our parents. It could be regret, bitterness, could be self-hatred, self-loathing. I mean, it's going to be a bunch of feelings, and we just kind of want to let that all up. And then you want a therapist because as they're coming up, we can't really do this work alone. We have to then be able to tell somebody to then have mirrored back to us what it's like to communicate then in honest ways. See, we were robbed of all this because the parents you see weren't a healthy mirror. Growing up, you need a parent to be a mirror to you and to sort of validate the child's experience, right? And so when all that's robbed, then even just basic communication goes out the window with anybody, including tolerating uncomfortable feelings, right? So I love what you were just saying there because once we start working with our feelings, which is not a bullet list, right? That's not anything we're going to do. Bam, okay, check this off, check that off. It's not like that. It's allowing all this gray area, who we really are, to kind of rise up, which is the opposite of what emotional incest is all about. That's all about sort of limiting and blocking and dissociating. Another common symptom that I was mentioning earlier that you asked about, and I know I had it for a while, develop OCD-ish kind of symptoms. Because with obsessive compulsive disorder, when you really think of what that's about, that's putting everything in order, right? You're trying to control things because your life in essence feels uncontrollable. So when anything is uncontrollable, you want to control. That starts all the patterns and the rituals for OCD. So it's going to be more about just letting and accepting. And that's the work, it takes some time. But I'm thrilled to hear, you've done a lot of work around this, obviously, and you were in therapy for a few years. And
I swear by it. I swear by it because um, I remember one time in a session, I was telling the therapist how I had got beaten up when I was a kid, stuff like that. And when I explained it, I said, yeah, I got over it. And then I started to laugh really loud. And then she was silent. And she was like, Fran, you should be angry. I'm like, what? Angry about what? The shit happened in the past.
mm-hmm.
She's like, I'm angry for you. Your
Mm,
child
wow.
deserves that type of uh, discipline. Like, they spanked you for nothing. Like, it was for a bowl of noodles that I overcooked.
Mm,
Like, that was like over the top. She was like, I'm angry for you.
mhm.
And when I stopped and I processed it, Brad, I was like, oh shit, I should be angry. So I think I went through like a whole week or two just crying about it and
Mhm.
upset, and my emotions were everywhere. So I had her on speed dial. So I swear by therapy. And, for those that are
Mhm.
looking for a safe space, Brad, this is where you come in and you swoop right up.
Yeah, you can't do the work alone, as I say, and what works best, we can't always, especially people in small towns, you can't necessarily have a wide variety of therapists to choose from, but hopefully somebody who's trained in childhood trauma or abuse of some sort, and because they're going to be able to get it more, they're going to understand it, and it sounds like your therapist, just from what you're describing, yeah, she was ideal to work with. And also stepping in, I love how she stepped in because people will use humor as a way to deflect against the anger, right? And even it'll turn into self deprecation sometimes, and
Yeah.
we laugh at ourselves. So she handled that so well of number one, pausing and just pointing it out. But then also, I love what she said, I'm carrying the anger for you. See, you needed to hear that. Anybody needs to hear that because they feel as though they're not entitled to have their anger, and it's been so dissociated from that. You need, in this case, like this therapist, to bring the person back in past the cognitive dissonance, because we're going to have that cognitive dissonance that this is even really real, like, oh, this is a thing. Yeah.
For cognitive dissonance, can you just explain to those for those that are watching and they don't understand what that term is?
So cognitive dissonance is when we try to dumb down or even block the truth because that's too much to take on. So even
Mm.
though maybe a part of us knows that that may be helpful, because working with the truth, right, is always going to be helpful, but we don't want to go there because it means if I crack this armor, if I go there, then it may open the floodgates for a lot of feelings that I
Mm,
don't want to deal with and or even know.
mm,
So to work with that feeling, we will put up what's referred to as cognitive dissonance. And the person usually, of course, doesn't even really know they're doing it. So in therapy, you have to help them understand this is just a bit of a coping mechanism, it's a defense mechanism. It's kind of too scary to go there, right? So you just kind of work with them on trying to help them see, number one, that the dissonance is there. And then gradually the walls can come down, hopefully. But like with you, you were completely ready because you understood what was being said. Hence, you cried, you said, for a good week or so
yeah.
after. That was the dissonance breaking down. You were getting in touch with the deep grief and the repressed emotions about what you had really been through and the deep sadness around that, right?
Yeah.
So, in the crying that you were describing, that's a great example of you breaking through the cognitive dissonance. Holy shit, I've been using laughter as a way to deal with my feelings. Wow, now this woman's giving me permission to get in touch with the anger. Wow, and now that I see that that's true, now I just feel out and out, just plain sad that I had to go through this. Oh, wow. Now I'm going to cry for a week. That is the dissonance breaking down. So,
Even in like speech, Meg had pointed out to me, she was like, "Hey, friend, I noticed in your speech that you were laughing, and I was wondering if that was really more of a nervous coping mechanism." And it even drove the point home even
uh,
more. I was like, "Oh, I hate you! Stop
well,
taking away my facade." But I really feel that therapists are. You guys give us permission to do the things that are healthy for us. That, like you said, we didn't have the tools before to help us regain our emotional sovereignty.
mm, well
So
said.
thank you. Thank you
Oh,
for your work.
oh, Thank you for saying that. And yeah, it's most of your therapists out there that tend to be your better therapists. I'm kind of generalizing now a bit. They're pretty good as therapists because they've done a lot of deep work on their own trauma. So they come usually from such a source of pain. And that's wonderful because if they're willing to work through their childhood pain and then get therapy for many years, obviously you're going to study, then they're going to make the quote unquote better therapist because they get it. They've been there. And I just want to say to your point you were making a minute ago about the speech, and just for anybody watching who, I don't know if you bring it up in your other podcast about that we're in Toastmasters, and that's the group that where I met Fran at. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because when she mentioned the speech a minute ago, it's interesting for me to hear you talk about your speaking abilities, because one of the reasons I go to Toastmasters is because of being robbed of my voice growing up for many years. I've had to work really hard on just maintaining a comfort level, getting up and talking in front of people. So hence I go to Toastmasters, and there are times and opportunities, obviously, where I have to do public speaking. And so, but I have to work at it. And that's, again, about my childhood. What I find interesting with you, and tell me your feelings about this, is in watching you up there, and you're a leader even in our group. Are you president? Is that your title? Yeah, president of our group. Just observing you up there and with your speeches, even sometimes singing, I see somebody so willing to show who she is. Has that changed for you over the years, your comfort level in front of people as you've gotten to know yourself? Because right now, what I see when you're up there is you appear to be very comfortable with your essence because you show your essence up there. You're vulnerable up there in your speeches. And like I say, when you sing and all that, you're willing to kind of step out of comfort zone. So
Yeah, it was definitely something I had to be very intentional about. And regardless of whether I was feeling like I wanted to do it or not, I did it because I wanted to break out of the mold of where I was and the story that I was telling myself.
mm,
I said, I can't be this person of growth and development if I'm not constantly putting myself in a place where I need to grow, regardless of how I'm feeling about it. Now, did I bitch about it on the way? Hell yeah, I did. I did the whole gamut, the emotions of like, oh my God, did I mess up? Oh my God. And even now, as I'm in this position of leadership, I don't even look at leadership as a title. I feel like it's a lifestyle because
yes.
we lead um, in the actions that we take every day.
Yeah.
So you're speaking to people whether or not it's verbal or nonverbal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had to work towards that shit. It didn't come easy.
Yeah. Well, you are doing a good job. And unfortunately, as I told you earlier, when before
Yeah.
we started, I'm going to have to wind it down in a minute or two because
Okay,
I have an
that's fine.
appointment I have to get to here soon.
So we're gonna do a part two. So
Yeah.
for those of you that
Okay.
enjoyed this conversation, we're going to do a part two. Brad, can you please let everybody know where they can find you? Because I know you have a dope YouTube channel. Please tell everybody
Yeah.
where they can find you.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. So a lot of people find me on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Brad Shore. And I have my mental health YouTube videos all uploaded there. And then if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me. It's basically my name. It's Brad P. Shore at earthlink.net. If anybody has questions or wants to reach out or inquire about anything, feel free to do that. And so I would love to do a part two. Yeah, because I can tell that there's so much more to talk about
Yeah,
here. So yeah, but thanks for having me on. It's been great connecting with you online.
it's my pleasure. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today and looking forward to connecting with you guys on our part two. Bye, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Bye bye. Thanks a lot, Fran.